Good morning. Thank you for joining me in this morning mindfulness practice. I picked up the book My Father Knew the Secret by Brian Proctor, and he talks about growing up with his dad, the late great Bob Proctor. And I'm so proud and honored to be friends with Brian Proctor and to have had his dad, Bob Proctor, be my coach and mentor. And he talks about the most important thing being able to make a clear and definite decision. And Bob Proctor said, faith and fear both demand that you believe in something that you cannot see. You choose. So Brian writes, when my father spoke about using your mental faculty of perception, he would drive home the point that our choices, not circumstances, create the life we desire. What is significant to one person may be small to another, and in our effort to grow and learn, we must be willing to use perception to consider many sides of a person, situation, or circumstance. Brian says it was always fun to watch the confusion unfold in the room when Dad would hold up a book and ask the audience if they saw the front or the back. Of course, they would say they saw the front of the book. Dad would insist it was the back, which would turn it into a scenario of who's right. Finally, he would point out that they were all right. The audience could see the front of the book, but my father, holding up the book, could only see the back. I remember hearing this story in a seminar that I attended with the two of them, and Brian says, many years ago, Dad reminded me of this lesson in perception when I was looking to purchase a home in Florida. I had fallen in love with a house I felt was out of my price range. I spoke to him about the house and the price, saying I thought the cost was prohibitive. He paused, looked me in the eye, and asked, compared to what? When I continued to argue my point by telling him the price, he responded, that's all? With those words, he caused me to change my perception instantly, which changed my perspective. It was as if all the clouds in my mind parted. The relationship with my dad has taught me that sometimes you must borrow someone else's belief in you when your belief in yourself is not on solid ground. Having Bob Proctor believe in me has kept me going when I couldn't see how I would get there or find the strength. Throughout my adult life, there have been times when Dad and I have lived far from each other, but during those years, we always found ways to spend time together. One year, he and Linda, his wife, rented a home in Florida, close to where I was living. So having him close gave us a lot of quiet, quality time together. During his time in Florida that year, I knew I needed his belief in me. Again, I was struggling with a decision about a house that would take me way out of my comfort zone. I knew in my heart that I wanted to go for it, but I was scared. I needed that extra push. No one pushes you like Bob Proctor. I know from experience that if I ask my father if he thinks I should do something out of my comfort zone, I am setting myself up to go for it. So I told Dad I needed some advice and asked to have lunch with him to discuss it. I let my thoughts flow as we sat outside in the beautiful Florida sunshine. He listened patiently as I explained the second home my wife Corey and I had purchased on the water at the southern end of Puget Sound in Washington State. The location is gorgeous with an expanse of a view. However, although patched together over the years, the original house had been built in 1903 and needed a lot of work. Essentially, the home was a teardown, but we would have to call it a remodel because its original build location was so near the water. It is much closer to the water than a home would be allowed to be built today. There were various permits, government agency surveys, and of course, significant costs that would be involved. It felt extremely complicated and costly because we also wanted to accomplish all this without seeking a loan to pay for it. This would require a large sum of money over the next year or so, money we did not have. Sure, we had some of it, but nowhere near what we needed to complete the project in cash. And once we signed the contract, we were committed. While explaining this, I went over all the different ideas Corey and I had brainstormed to make it happen. Now, here's the thing. Although I was struggling with the decision, I knew how much I wanted it. So I was ultimately aligned with my desire. My heart was going full speed ahead, but my head was trying to slow me down. I was scared. But as I've said, I would not have asked Bob Proctor, my father, for advice if I didn't want to do it. I was putting myself on the hook by talking with him. As I continued telling him how we could bring in income, I felt excited. Finally, Dad stopped me and asked, "Brian, do you really want this? You will find a way to make this happen if your want is strong enough. You do not need to figure it all out right here, right now. If this idea scares you, then you are likely on the right track." While sitting there and hearing myself talk, I knew I had committed to moving forward. I quickly went from a desire to a decision to a committed decision. That is part of the wonder in being in Bob Proctor's energy. Anything feels possible, and you will frequently find yourself experiencing quantum leaps. I left that lunch knowing I wasn't looking back. So each day, I wrote out and thought about this goal. I added a detail to my vision of the house completed. Corey and I would talk about it each night at dinner. We would get excited and talk about having the kids together at the house and what that would feel like. The energy we were putting into this added to the realness of the goal completed. Each day I became clearer on what needed to be done to achieve it. I was paying attention to daily opportunities and taking action. It wasn't long before I became obsessed. And obsessed is what you need to be. You need to fuse with your desire. Dad had been teaching me this lesson for as long as I can remember, and it makes me laugh to think of his patience as he listened to me at the age of 57, asking him if he thought I should go for it. Today, as I write these words, Corey and I are living in that beautiful, custom-built home on the water and loving every minute of it. And we are also proud of everything we did to get here. By only focusing on how we could do it, we no longer gave any energy to why we couldn't. As a result, in a relatively short period, we were able to build the house we truly wanted the way we wanted. At our matrix events that were held in Toronto, we worked closely with each client to coach them on the initial stages of goal setting and help them to stretch their big C-type goal, a goal that excites and scares them at the same time. During the first part, we would work on their vision and help them to create an emotional attachment to that vision with descriptive words that excited them. Then we would coach them on staying open to questioning their beliefs about accomplishing big goals. Finally, we would guide them to stay out of the idea of how at this stage. That is precisely what Dad did with me that day in Florida. Once he got me on track, nothing stopped me. Now, when I'm working on something I know will cause me to stretch, I tap into that memory of sitting with him at that restaurant in Florida. By stepping back and altering my perception, I can create multiple perspectives that change everything. My most significant growth has happened when I have been my most uncomfortable. There is a quote by Steve Jobs that Bob Proctor liked to use. You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward. So you must trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You must trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. This approach has never let me down and has made all the difference in my life. What Steve Jobs said makes so much sense to me. I could never have imagined what obstacles I would face when working to achieve some of my biggest goals, let alone plan for them. Knowing the specifics of challenges in advance may have held me back. That is why faith in what you want and your ability to achieve it is essential. Brian Proctor continues to write, I have gotten to where I get excited about the feeling of fear because I know it means growth. As Bob Proctor said, stop overthinking. It's okay not to know the answers. Answers will come to you when you least expect them. Relax. Consider this. Do you have a desire that you push aside because you cannot imagine how you would achieve it? Everything is possible. It doesn't matter if you're starting small or that it may be a while before you get there. Your growth occurs in the process of the journey. Stay open to the fact that anything is possible for you. Believing in yourself and surrounding yourself with others who believe in you will bring more of yourself to the surface. And when you get there, you will have created something even more beautiful than you originally imagined. What does it mean to change your perception? Maintaining a singular perception in your life can prohibit your growth. Think about how frequently we get locked into our point of view as the right way, the only way, or the best way. Instead, consider that there could very well be a better way, different from the one you see right now. Remaining open to the certainty that everything is perception widens your view. Brian Proctor writes, I am so conscious of this when I talk to people. I never lock into my idea as the only way. Dad taught me to be open to the fundamental fact that everything has many sides. And Bob Proctor also talked about getting unstuck. He would say, you are the only problem, and you are the only problem you will ever have, and you are the only solution. Recognize that everything is temporary, including feeling stuck. If you're not where you want to be in life, it is you that must decide to do something about it. Nothing is achieved without effort. And the best part is that when you decide and start taking action, it won't be long before you begin to see things differently. Making the decision is the hard part. Once that is done, your mind will become laser focused and you will make moves with intention. Sometimes during a seminar, Bob Proctor would bring in guests and entertainment. One time in Los Angeles, they brought in a comedian and transformational speaker, Kyle Cease. Kyle said something from the stage that stuck with all of us. He said, when wrestling with a decision, you can only measure what you are giving up. You cannot measure what you will gain. Unfortunately, that unknown is what keeps us stuck where we are, even if we're unhappy. Staying stuck means we know what to expect, so we stay there because change can feel scary and we cannot measure the gain of what that change could bring. Brian continues, whenever I was struggling, Dad would start asking me questions. Brian, what are your limiting beliefs about? Why are you holding on to those beliefs? And what can you do to change them? Those questions would get me thinking. Dad knew that he could get me to, if he could get me to examine my thinking, and that if he could push me to face what was holding me back, I would be able to do the work to make the change that was necessary for me to reach my next level. One of these conversations with my father happened because of the resistance I felt about getting on stage at our events. I knew I had a message I could share, but I always got so nervous before I went up that I often felt that the message I was sharing was not clear due to my nervousness. Each morning while on the road for an event and before the day got rolling, Dad and I would enjoy an early morning cup of coffee together in the hotel room. That was a special time for both of us. During one of those mornings, I brought up my anxiousness about going on stage that afternoon. I could feel myself stuck in a loop of fear. Dad looked me in the eyes and said two things to me that made all the difference. First and foremost, he said, it is none of your business what people think of you. I've heard him say that many times in many situations, but applying it to myself in that scenario gave it new meaning. However, it was the next thing he said that got me unstuck. He said, if you are nervous on stage, the mistake you are making is that you're thinking about yourself rather than the value of what you have to share with the audience. Everything will change if you take the focus off of yourself and instead focus on serving. He coached me to engage with the group as if I was having a relaxed conversation with a friend. And then he said, Brian, you have no idea how what you have to share could impact even one person. That's why we are here. That's why we share our knowledge and experience. It's why we share our stories so others can gain. Focus outward and focus on adding value. That conversation got me unstuck. I have never been afraid again when speaking in front of an audience. If I ever hesitate, I take a deep breath, narrow my focus to the people in front of me, and think back to that conversation with Dad in his hotel room. And then I speak from my heart. An exercise that has helped me when I feel anxious is to bring myself into the present moment. Our mind causes all our suffering. When stressed or anxious, we are either living in the past or building a picture of a dire future. I have trained myself to shift my thoughts with intention to what I can do right here, right now, to make this moment better. I ask myself, how can I contribute? Then I push myself to participate and to show up. Get excited about what is next for you and be excited about today. These actions will help you get unstuck. Consider, how do you weaken limiting beliefs? You replace them with a new belief. Most of the time, we are unaware of our limiting beliefs. We don't even consider that our thoughts and beliefs could be what are holding us back. So, to create meaningful change, we must examine our beliefs on money, our beliefs on love, our beliefs on relationships, work, business, etc. And we need to examine them often. As you gain an understanding of what your beliefs are, write them out. Then begin doing the work to alter those limitations by directing your thoughts to create something different. Take out a pen and paper and write their polar opposite. What is a limiting belief that you have? Write down what is the opposite of what you're thinking about, what you're believing, what you're worried about. Doing this work could change a pattern that has existed for generations within your family. You could end those patterns by changing a belief that is possibly holding you and others back. It's also important to figure out what old wounds you are hanging on to and why you're hanging on to them. What triggers those memories? Those wounds can become a part of our belief system, and hanging on to them could be a coping mechanism to avoid being accountable for current circumstances. When you shine a light on that realization, you can begin the work of healing. Try this exercise. Close your eyes and think about what you really want. How does that make you feel? Can you see yourself receiving it, or does a limiting belief start to show itself? In these moments of looking at what you want, identify your limiting beliefs by paying attention to thoughts that interfere with your desire. It will appear as a I can't do that because, or why do you think you are? Who do you think you are that you could do or be or have that? Don't beat yourself up for having these thoughts, or if those thoughts return, you're not responsible for the limiting beliefs you've acquired before today. However, you are now responsible for changing them. So instead of being frustrated with yourself, simply stand in awareness and focus on replacing them with thoughts that support your desire. Focus on strengthening your mind by being prepared with supportive self-affirmations when limiting thoughts arise. Change your channel and make the new channel stronger by spending more time there. Give your channel, your new way of thinking, the loudest voice in your head. Bob Proctor also would suggest that you write out your desire, set it as a goal, write it in the present tense, and carry that card around with you. Read it often throughout the day, but more importantly, feel it. How would you feel to have already been in that dream house, that loving marriage, that trip of a lifetime, that purposeful work, that whatever your deep desire is, it's already done. If you have limiting beliefs, and we all do, write down the opposite and focus, laser focus your attention on how would you feel now that your goal is accomplished. You're living in that deepest desire. Create that. Create a wonderful day. Enjoy your weekend. Take time to do the exercises. And I'll see you back here Monday morning at 7. Thank you.